Okay. Good to go.
All right.
Kick it off.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Night of Adventure podcast. I'm Dave Greene.
And I am Chris Surrette.
On this episode, we are sitting down with the one and only Nico Manos.
Yeah, the legend himself.
Did I say that right?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Pleasure to host you at the shop.
Yeah, it's a great space.
We are sitting down right in the Lawrencetown Surf Co. shop here on Lawrencetown Road.
Yeah, and I had an amazing bike ride to get here on the rails to trails. Like, we're so lucky to have this in our backyard.
You're lucky, man.
For sure.
We are.
Those trails are awesome. I just started using them, actually. Like, I've been on them before, but I had a knee injury 6 months ago, and biking is a big part of the rehab for that.
Okay.
And, yeah, biking an hour 3-4 times a week, and those trails are, like,
Man.
I'm really, really enjoying them. And,
Nice.
and you can get everywhere. I had to go pick up my truck in Cole Harbor, so I biked to Cole Harbor. It was like 40 minutes later, I was there.
Sure.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a huge mission.
You want to get up to Porter's Lake?
No problem.
No problem.
No, and I always tell people, too, like, the biggest draw for me is that they're flat, right? They're built on old railway beds, so, you know, you don't have to worry about any hills or anything like that, too. So it's pretty awesome.
Nico, could you introduce yourself quickly for us?
Yeah, sure. Nico Manos, 39 years old now. Wow. Slower to come back from injury than I was 10 years ago. I grew up in Halifax. I moved out to Lawrencetown, I want to say when I was 19 or 20. I had my first job at the Lawrencetown Beach
No way.
canteen, cutting fries.
Really?
Yeah. So Jill and I built a house out here in 2008, maybe.
Okay.
And yeah, we're super happy. I remember moving into the neighborhood and thinking there weren't that many young people
Yeah.
around. You know, but I think a lot of people younger generation had sort of moved into the core, into Halifax, and left an older demographic out by the coast. And but you know, we loved surfing and we loved what the area offered. But it wasn't like soon after that it just seemed like every house that sold was sold to somebody in their 20s, and
Yeah.
the neighborhood like revived itself. And I think that's still going strong now, with just a huge amount of incredible people moving into the neighborhood, and the schools filling up with kids, and, you know, kiteboarders, you know, all over Stony, and surfers all over Lawrencetown, and tons of people using the trail and biking, and
Yeah.
it's really neat to see.
And so for you, I mean, I want to get into the growth of surfing for sure, because you've been right in the middle of that. But like, talk a little bit about kind of how you started surfing. I know swimming was your big thing, right? Like, you were a competitive swimmer when you were younger. How did surfing come on your radar, given the fact that it wasn't huge, you know? But what's this, like 25 years ago?
Yep. So
Not
yeah,
many people were surfing.
It's not your typical, it's not your football, hockey.
Right.
right. It's still not, but it
Baseball,
almost seems
soccer.
like it's becoming that, you know? Yeah. I grew up swimming for the Trojans in Halifax.
But even before that, did you have an intimate relationship with water?
Yeah. I mean, my parents did a lot of traveling, so we actually spent time in Australia and Fiji
Yeah.
and some cool locations that I got to spend some time at the beach, I'd say.
Yeah.
And I think I was just full of energy, and they were wondering how to deal with that. So stuffed the kid's head underwater, and, you know, he can't yell, he can't scream, and hopefully he's got less energy when he gets home. And that's sort of what happened. I started swimming at 8, and, you know, before I knew it, there was, you know, it was 10 workouts a week. And
Wow.
but I think it prepared me really well for, you know, my true love, which was surfing, and it just made me really comfortable and confident in the water, and allowed me to surf for long periods of time, and catch more waves than maybe your average Joe, and improve at a sort of a faster rate. I think I was 12 when my swim coach, who was my first experience in waves at Lawrencetown, he took the team out surfing.
Okay.
And it was really actually pretty big, which is kind of rare for summer. Usually we have really friendly conditions, 2-3 foot for most of the summer. But anyway, he knew we were all comfortable, so he took us out, and
Okay.
we went out boogie boarding and swimming and,
Cool.
and surfing, and that was the first sort of taste. And then we had a training camp down in Florida a few years later. I was 14 or 15, and we rented boards and went surfing there. And some of the folks on the team, mentioned that, we surfed at Lawrencetown. We should surf when we come back, buy boards this summer. Summers have the summers off.
Right. Okay.
It's mostly just a school year thing. So we that summer we bought boards, and I think I was 15. So our parents were still like driving us around and stuff. And I feel like we surfed 30 or 40 days of the 60 days that summer. And then it was like, we never looked back. I think 3 of us quit the swim team that year, and we were just surfing every chance we could get.
Did you ever do any lifeguarding or anything like that?
Totally, yeah. So after working at the canteen as my first job, I realized that I could also lifeguard, which is what some of my friends did. Being a strong swimmer, I just needed to take my national certificate, which I did, and got into there. And that was a fantastic avenue because it allowed you to also surf during work. Back then there was 4 lifeguards at Lawrencetown Beach, and depending on populations, you would have so much time in the chair and then so much time where you could be in the water training and doing other things. And surfing was accepted as sort of something we could do for training, which makes sense. You build knowledge around rips and types of breaking waves and sandbars, and you're also just in the water in case somebody gets into trouble, which is pretty rare. One of your lifeguards that's on duty can whistle, signal you, and signal for a pickup, and you can just swim over and hang out with the person.
Right.
Maybe they can hang onto your board until a lifeguard who's got a rescue board can come out and get them. So, I mean, of the 30 rescues I made in 8 years, I think likely probably all but a couple were made with my surfboard. Hey, let's hang here.
So it's a good training ground for you then when you're essentially a kid still. It's a good training ground just to get that confidence in yourself and confidence on the board and the water.
Absolutely, yeah. And then with the surf school too, confidence is an interesting topic because we deal with this every day, having a surf school, which is my wife and I own the East Coast Surf School, which started 18 years ago.
Right. And for folks listening, I mean, there could be, actually, we have a lot of listeners coming in from Germany and Australia, actually. So this is in Lawrencetown, Nova Scotia, Canada.
Yeah, true. The one on the eastern shore, not the one in the valley.
And this is a Lawrencetown Surf Co. Yeah, that's right. East Coast Surf School.
Yeah. So we have the surf shop, which is Lawrencetown Surf Company, which caters to experienced surfers, and then we also have a surf school, which is East Coast Surf School. And East Coast Surf School was started 18 years ago by my wife and myself as something I did prior to my lifeguarding shift. It was never meant to be a huge business or anything. It was just I aimed to teach one lesson in the morning as supplemental income. It's something I love doing. And over the years, it sort of gained, surfing globally just gained interest, and Nova Scotia has this wonderful natural resource of nonstop waves. So it just grew and grew and grew to, I think we had at our peak this summer, 30 employees, 25 or so instructors, and then 5 people that work at the shop.
Okay.
And so one thing that we go over with the instructors is a big part of our preseason training is realizing and knowing how fearful some people are of the ocean. We teach, 99% of our students are beginners. A lot of them are just looking to cross this off their list, but it comes with a lot of apprehension and fear and unknown. And a big part of our job, and what I train the instructors on preseason, is earning the trust of those people really quickly, because you don't have too long, and letting them know that we're in really safe conditions. We're in waist deep water. We don't need to go out any further. The waves are a perfect size for learning. You're connected to a huge flotation device, your surfboard.
Right.
You've got people around you. Most of them are beginners too. There's 4 lifeguards on the beach. Just and that can even sometimes start on the phone booking a lesson.
Right.
But just letting them know that there's not a whole lot to worry about, especially in the summer months when they have an instructor. And I think sometimes our instructors and myself, we just take the safety and confidence side for granted because we've grown up with this environment. It's nothing for us to paddle out into 10, 15 foot waves. It wouldn't raise the heartbeat.
Sure.
And then we just have to step back and understand that some of these people have never seen the ocean before.
Right.
And that's our job, to look after them, but also just make them comfortable and confident in the environment that we are comfortable in. So,
Right.
yeah, it's interesting now, just even watching like my son who's 7, no fear. Like we've just spent so much time
Sure.
at the beach, and he's just cool to like grab his board, leash up, and paddle out and just hang with some people out the back.
Well, it's interesting too what you're saying here about confidence and fear, but at the same time to hold a huge amount of respect for the ocean too, right? Because it demands that.
For sure. Yeah. That's a good point too.
So it's,
yeah.
it's a bit of like a balancing act, right?
And that's something that we're also very eager to tell people, is that just because your lesson is done doesn't mean that we go away. Like every time you come back to the beach, we're always stoked to talk. We're always stoked to look at conditions. We're always available to analyze, the surf and make a recommendation of where to paddle out or maybe not to paddle out.
Sure.
And like I said, summertime, pretty rare that we get anything over 2 or 3 foot. But then you get into fall and winter, and then it becomes a whole different story. And that's actually worked out really nicely for us, because we can put our head down and work all summer long.
Yeah.
And then we can enjoy some bigger, more exciting surf in the fall and winter. Because it does, the surf gets really good here as well. Not on a daily basis. It's a little bit inconsistent, but it's definitely, it has its day that it can be world class for sure.
Right, of course.
I need to go back for a second because I just learned this. I didn't know this about you, but you concocted a plan in high school, I believe, to finish early so that you could, in your grade 12 year, travel?
Yeah. So
yeah.
I felt like I got into high school, and in grade 10, I was like, I'm already over this. I don't want to be here anymore. It gets dark so soon after school that I can't get out to the beach and go surfing. And they give you free periods. You're supposed to, I don't know what you're supposed to do with those. Maybe they're a break, but there was enough free periods to slam all my grade 12 courses into my grade 10 and 11 year, which would allow me to take that year off and travel. And I just wanted to get out of there.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to QEH, which is now, it's
Citadel,
been ripped down.
probably.
It's Citadel High or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So I think in the end, I was 1 credit short, and I ended up taking it online while I was traveling.
So where did you go? Explain that experience as a, 17-year-old?
Yeah, I think I was 16 or 17, or maybe it was right before my 17th birthday. I was pretty, like, looking back on a 16-year-old now, I feel like that's really young. But then I was, not feeling like I was a young child.
Right.
I was.
So at that point, you were thinking, if I want to get better at surfing, you were thinking you could keep doing it, or you just want to do it because you want to have a good time? Like, what was your mentality? Like, did you think there was a future in professional surfing?
No, I had no aspirations of being like, I had like super small local sponsors, shops and stuff like that. But there was never a point in my life at that point that I thought, yeah, I'm going to be a professional surfer.
Because at that point, there had been no professional surfers from Nova Scotia or from Canada.
I feel like there was nobody in Canada making a living surfing. Shortly after that, maybe early 2000s, Raph Bruweiler would have been sponsored by Quicksilver, which sort of paved the way for some other athletes.
He's a West Coast guy.
And he's a West Coast guy. And so, no, that wasn't even really a thought. I think the plan and the thought was, I'm just going to get to do what I love every single day in warm water. And I knew I didn't really want to go to university either. So it was, or at that point, but I guess I had a supportive family as well. And they were okay with, maybe it happens in 4 or 5 years when you're ready. Both my sisters became doctors, and both my parents were professors at the time. So I think I probably saw their workload too and decided that maybe I wasn't ready for that.
So I'm a parent. You're a parent too. So all I think about is like, wow, you're 16 years old. You're in Central America. Like, where exactly did you go? Did you have like a billet family? Like, what was your living situation?
No, yeah. So
was this a one-way ticket?
It was one-way ticket, and I went to Costa Rica, which at the time was sort of like the considered the safest Central American country. And no, I just brought a tent and I slept on the beach. and
Okay.
I buried my
Wow.
passport and my other valuable things in the sand.
Come on.
And I
Is
lived
that,
there for
is that something somebody else taught you, or is that you just figured that one out?
No.
So, all right. So you're dirtbagging it like big time then.
Oh my God, yeah. I think I had something like $4,000 saved up, and I was looking to stay away until summer, so I needed to stretch it 6 months.
So you get off the plane and then you just have a surfboard under your arm and like a bag of clothes and stuff and
Yeah,
like
one backpack.
let's go.
Yeah, one backpack, the tent, and a board bag with one surfboard in it.
How long did it take you to meet other surfers and like how did you fall into some kind of clique? Did you meet some people and
It wasn't probably as cool as it sounds. Like there wasn't like a group of like good 17-year-old surfers like cruising the country.
No,
I
that's
was
what
just hopping in with random people that were going surfing. It's a tourist destination for surfers, so there's definitely a lot of like my Spanish isn't awesome, so I'd meet other, American or Canadian surfers and hop in and hitch a ride somewhere, and I sort of saw most of the coast and hung out with people for a few days while they were visiting, and then they'd leave and I'd hitch a ride somewhere else with somebody else. And I just cruised and flowed, and eventually ended up at like an abandoned hotel that was like taken over by a drug trafficker, and I was sleeping in front of it, and I ended up anyway sort of making friends with some of his friends and staying in this dilapidated restaurant out front of that place. Anyway, I don't use drugs. That's
Right.
not why I was there.
No,
Like
yeah.
I'll drink the occasional beer, maybe two, but I'm not like heavy into that scene. So I stayed there.
It's pretty clear that you were down there to surf.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
And nothing was going to get in your way of that.
So
Yeah.
like at what point did you like did people notice you or did you kind of like figure out like hey I'm actually really good at this? Like did you start sharpening your skills? Like what was your acceleration from the time you got there to, you're a few weeks in, a few months in? Like what like
Yeah.
all
so
you're doing is surfing, so I imagine you're getting pretty good pretty quick.
I was just in the water every morning and every evening and most of the day, like completely rashed up, sunburned, like, but it was incremental. It was like little bit by little bit. And I don't think I was realizing the progression that happened in that 6 months. But a lot of that is subconscious. It's just your way of moving through the water and the waves you're selecting and stringing one maneuver to the next maneuver in a better way. And then I think like when I got back 6 months later, I was probably one of the better surfers in the Lawrencetown,
And
Nova Scotia
before you
area.
left, would you have said that?
No, I think I was like sort of promising and improving quickly. But the difference was more obvious when I got back. And our waves are really actually pretty easy to surf. Costa Rica is sometimes difficult. There's a lot of closeout. The waves are kind of quick and hollow and steep, and our waves are a little bit more user friendly. So I think that the skill kind of like came out and found itself almost when I got back. But it's still at that point, I was still like only locally good. I wasn't more than novelty good. I wasn't more than like a novelty Canadian good. But I kept traveling. And so I did end up probably traveling for the better part of 10 years.
What
straight.
was the first like competition where you got to kind of stack up against other people and realize like, okay,
Yeah, so I had been sort of recognized and sponsored by Quicksilver at this point already, but they had it was a Red Bull ice break event, and they brought some of the best surfers from the U.S. East Coast. So, Florida's hotbed for talent. South Carolina, North Carolina has produced some incredible surfers, as have the other states. And they took some of the best surfers from the East Coast, and they had this final in Nova Scotia with, I think it was 24 surfers. I just narrowly missed the final of that. And I think the final was top 6, and I came 7th or 8th, just narrowly missed. but I beat a lot of really good people and people that I had seen in magazines and, you know, people that I had looked up to growing up. And that was probably a confidence boost for sure.
What does, because are you still the only professional from Nova Scotia, or like technically?
It's a hard question. It depends on your definitions. Right. So my definitions would be like sponsored, which is you're getting free gear or discounts on gear, things like that. Semi-professional would mean you're getting paid, but you're not making a living. You need to supplement it with other jobs. Or professional, which I would consider is like you're making enough that you can support yourself without supplementing. So like there are other sponsored surfers. I don't know that any of them that have come out of Nova Scotia, I don't know that any of them have made full livings, but I also don't like ask the specifics and things.
Right.
And for about 10 years, I was making enough to live, but I was also supplementing and working hard as well. Because when I signed the first contract with Quicksilver, I thought it was like, I'm like, this is so sick. I'm going to live this year up really hard, but I'm also going to work because it's probably going to be over in 12 months. Mm-hmm. Right. Like this is, I need to take advantage of this, you know, making a little bit of money and having a schedule where I can also work. But then like the contract got renewed for 3 years and I was like, okay, well, this is wicked, but I needed to work because I also didn't have an education.
Right.
and so I felt like I needed to hustle a little bit, but the 1 year turned to 4 and then, and then it turned to 10. And then I eventually almost backed myself out of professional surfing because we wanted to have a family and raise kids. And, you can't do that. Or I didn't feel like it was responsible to do that being on the road 8 months a year.
So what year was that when you started to kind of transition out of that scene?
I feel like that was maybe 2014 or so. Like, my son was born in 2016. So 15 back to 2014, 2015. And what was nice about it was that at that point, the business had gone from me working before work, teaching a lesson before lifeguarding, to probably 15 to 20 employees at that point. And I could still surf. Like that's one of the great things about owning your own business is you work a lot, but you can also be flexible and you can push your work to, I might work a day that's 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. and surf before that. And that's,
And surfing is part of your job too at that point.
Yeah.
To a certain degree.
Lots of great write-offs there.
Yeah.
It worked out pretty well in that the business was now, healthy enough, I'll say, to back out of some of the contracts and have some more time for myself. And I've also felt at that point I was more secure about accomplishing some things. Like surfing's tough because you're like, if you don't, there's only, there's not that many contests. They're really hard to do well. You can be an excellent surfer and not do well in contests. Yeah. So the sponsorship side of things tends to be affirmation that you are good. It shouldn't be, but it is, right? Like Quicksilver has recognized me, Oakley has recognized me, Nixon has recognized me, and every time you get recognized and sponsored, it's confidence and affirmation that you are good. And I think that, as you're growing up and you're putting all this work into something, that those companies recognizing you really means something, and it builds confidence and security that you've accomplished something. And so I think that was really important for me early, but less so after 10 years. And I needed a change of pace too. I also didn't it's weird being so connected to something like surfing because it just devours your identity. Like you're nothing else. And it's like Nico, the surfer. And you're like, well, like I'm a good friend and I'm a decent husband and a good dad too. And like nobody's the surfer, it's just like it's kind of nice to build an identity outside of that as well.
So when you first signed those contracts, I mean, this is pre-social media, right? So like how does a contract like that work like what are your obligations? I mean, are they paying your way into competitions plus giving you gear plus a paycheck? Like what?
It grew. So it started with gear, and then it moved into travel allowance. They wanted to send me places and for me to progress, and so I had a travel allowance. And then I started getting a photo incentive, which basically just means if you're traveling somewhere and a photographer gets a great shot of you, and you're wearing their product, and it shows up in a magazine, they're stoked because they don't have to spend $15,000 on an advertisement.
Right.
They're there, and so they might give you a $500 or $1,000 incentive check to, like, great work showing up. And then eventually you show up and start showing up so often that they're like, we want to stop giving you that $1,000 so much, and we're just going to put you on a retainer for 300 or 1,000 or 1,500. It depends on who the sponsor is, but you can sort of build your sponsorship too. Quicksilver was my biggest sponsor, but they didn't make sunglasses, so I approached Oakley, and neither of them made watches, so I approached Nixon, and none of them made surfboards, so I approached JS. And you sort of build like that until you have a portfolio of sponsors who are giving you little bits and pieces a month that make up like a decent salary and allows you to travel and things like that.
And then are you using some of that money to hire a photographer sometimes? Like I know Scotty Sharon did a lot of work for you. And things like that
Scotty's awesome. We worked together for a long time, as I did with other photographers. No, the magazines are where the source of the money comes from. So the magazine will pay the photographer for the content that they're publishing. They'll also pay a writer for the content that they're publishing. And then, so the magazines pay those people. But if you work in a team and you create great content, then the magazines purchase it, and everyone's sort of stoked. Like, great example, we went to Alaska for 10 days, and we spent the entire time on a resalvage fishing, 65-foot fishing boat, like, insane trip. One of the most exotic places and trips I've ever been in my life. And I was with Michael Q, who is a writer, and we were with the photographer Scott Dickinson and another professional surfer. And we put together a package, the writer did really, with the photographer and the writing, and he sold it to, I believe, Surfer magazine. And then he turned around and sold the same magazine or article and package to Surfer's Journal, I think, which is sort of different demographic. And then he sold it to a European magazine. Wow. And then they translated it into French, and then they translated it into Spanish, and then they, I think, published it in Australia. And so they just turned it over, and the writer did super well because he's getting per word price from every magazine, and the photographer's selling to the photos to every magazine. And then my photo incentives are going through the roof because
your sponsors
this one
are
trip, this one trip is now being recirculated through all these different countries, and it's great publicity for the company.
The good old days, man. I mean, it must look a lot different now, like with...
It was a hustle then, but now it's even harder, I think, because now the obligations are, Instagram, Facebook, just nonstop content. Right. And it's also, it's just it's different. I'm glad I'm not in there.
I don't really being involved in that at all.
I don't love self-promotion. I think that's like one of the things I struggled most with while I was surfing with them, but I could rely on writers and photographers to help me with that. That may come as a surprise to some people.
Not to me. I mean, I know you, so I know that like even a lot of this conversation is probably making you a little bit uncomfortable.
My image showed up a lot, but that wasn't because I was trying to sell the image. It was because I was working with great people.
You're out surf. I mean, like that's the difference now. Like you get to go out and you went surfing, and people snap shots of you in your element. Now there's so much social media obligations. You got to be in front of the camera. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to post at X amount of times. And it's more, I think nowadays the personality. Surfers a lot more intimately than you used to, because you used to just, at least for me, like peripherally, like I used to see surfers in magazines, and I would read their quotes and stuff, so I would know a little bit about them, but that's it.
They are very much now their own brand almost. They have to push so hard.
So
and there'd be so much more visible competition. Because
it's a different landscape. I mean, the growth of the sport has just been insane too. So I can only imagine how saturated.
The talent pool is so deep now you have to have a creative side and an original side to get out there, because they can pick from 1,000 people that are all good enough to be sponsored, and it's going to be like the 10 individuals who are just different and are pushing in different ways and being creative and things like that.
So you grew up with a connection to the outdoors and being outside, and then quickly switched to primary focus was the ocean. What where do you think you got your sense of adventure from, and how much of that do you think can you attribute to surfing? Because obviously with surfing, the sense of adventure is pretty wild. I mean, you're looking at maps, you're looking at where things could break. I mean, even in our own province here, I mean, you can pull out a map and kind of look at that coastline and dream and think and scheme and then plot your attack. I mean, you're out there a lot.
That's a good point, Chris. And it takes a lot of imagination too, right? Yeah.
Huge.
So that's a really good question that I haven't thought about really. We traveled a lot as a family when I was younger. Both my teachers were professors. Sorry, both my parents were professors. They
teachers.
would, yeah,
Life teachers.
and they would coordinate their sabbatical years. So every 7 years, we would go on like a year-long trip, and we went all over the place, China, Fiji, Australia, New Zealand. Europe, Hawaii. We traveled quite a lot, so that was a cool opportunity, and I think that's probably and potentially where it sparked. I don't know. We also didn't have a car. It was like an interesting. My parents spent money on interesting things like traveling and not cars. We didn't have a car till I was, I think, 15 or 16.
Living in downtown Halifax.
In Halifax, but I mean, maybe I was exploring streets and alleyways and shortcuts to get to the swimming pool.
Did you skateboard?
And skateboard a little bit.
Did you? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so that's like, I mean, I was exploring town too, in different ways than most kids were, which they would have been getting dropped off at the swimming pool, taking Quimple Road down to Roby Street or whatever.
Right. And you're walking.
And I'm like, how do I get through Dal campus quicker than than I can to get to the Dalplex? But yeah, I don't know. I think that so exploration and adventure on a surfing side just adds so much to surfing, and you can improve and you can learn new things. But when you start exploring and discovering different surf spots, some surf spots are way better than others, and you start to realize that. And some are really fast and some are slower. Some are way bigger than others on the same day. And so you sort of start mapping out the spots that are close to you, and then you look at, there's 30,000 kilometers of coastline in Atlantic Canada or something that's swell exposed, and you start wondering what's out there. And you hear little murmurs and whispers of other spots. And I think that's kind of like how that started. At the time, there were less surfers, and the lineups and surf spots were less crowded, and there was really like not a lot of reason to drive anywhere.
So you didn't have to go very far.
Yeah, you kind of wanted someone to surf with at that point. Like,
Sure.
I remember getting driven out to some of the spots. My mom would drive me, but she wouldn't let me surf by myself. So we'd be like looking for cars that were driving by with surfboards on the roof and follow them, because it'd be firing. And she wouldn't let me get in. I'd be in my wetsuit, like ready to go. And we'd just follow cars. So yeah, the last thing I wanted to do was go somewhere where I knew there wouldn't be anybody. But as the years progressed and we started like just branching out, 25 minutes from our comfort zones and our go-to spots, then we started realizing that, it's possible to get way better waves on the same day somewhere else. Maybe the waves are coming out of the east one day instead of the south, and there's, spots that are 2-3 times as big as where we'd normally surf. And that was exciting. We, see brand new spots, and that just really like sparked something in us, where there's a kind of a group of us that were going after it, I guess, and just sort of trying to make maps of.
I was gonna say, you're just using road maps and stuff, and
it was
whatever you could get your hands on.
Yeah,
probably,
and so
right?
we had this one super thick road map. Like book, and that we'd take all our notes on, and swell angles out of this, wind directions out of that. This is the swell height and period. There's so much that goes into making a surf spot truly tick.
Do you still have that book?
I do somewhere, but but now it's
Just for your own.
What's in there more is like how to get to a spot that's not accessible by road. It's like there's a little sight line that somebody's cut out to divide a property. It's the second driveway once you're off the main road, because you start forgetting those details. But the actual surf spots, the elements that make them really good is in my head, ingrained forever. It's how to get there that I sometimes forget. I was having this conversation with my buddy John the other day. We were having a few beers, and I told him that he could pull up any piece of coastline in Nova Scotia.
Okay.
And I would tell him exactly where it was.
Just by a photo, you mean?
Just overhead satellite image.
Satellite image.
Zoom in as much as you want to go.
Wow.
And I will tell you exactly where that is, because I have the entire coast, every little nook and cranny and inlet and harbor and headland and island. I could draw it for you. And so, he's having a few beers and he'll zoom in. Where's this? And then,
That's
So
pretty
you
cool.
as long as it's swell exposed,
Yeah.
I'm pretty good. Someone threw me off once with Pictou Island, and I got it, Pictou
Did
Island,
you?
but I didn't know where on Pictou Island
Oh
was.
my
I just
God.
process of elimination. I've never been there, and I
It's cool.
knew that
You
I'd been
should
everywhere
go.
else. What's that?
It's cool. You should go.
Yeah.
It's an awesome spot.
Yeah,
Cool.
someday.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've never surfed on Pictou Island? then?
No,
There you go.
somebody will get it, right?
Someone's
Maybe a
I
little
guarantee someone's gonna get
northeast
it.
swell, something.
I stand up paddleboarded
St.
on Pictou
Lawrence.
Island, so I caught little baby waves on the beach.
There looks like there's beautiful beaches.
Oh,
That's a beautiful spot.
unbelievable! Yeah. Great sunsets too.
That's one of the things that I use actually now to look for waves in unknown places is like Google Maps didn't exist. The satellite imagery
of
didn't
course
exist when I first started exploring. So you would like get somewhere and you'd be like, oh, there's 3 islands blocking every bit of swell that's getting in here.
Right.
Right.
Now viewpoint's kind of an interesting one to
Sure.
to use, because you can, if you're interested in an area, you can click on a for sale property and they often have photos of their beautiful view of the ocean, and you might say, well, that looks very conducive to
Wow.
a well breaking left hand point break or something along those lines.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of obviously won't ask about secret spots or anything, but like I am curious.
No, let's get into it. What's your favorite secret
yeah.
spot? Yeah.
Are there people using boats to access more remote breaks?
Definitely.
Because I look at the coastlines as a paddler, as a sea kayaker, canoeist, or whatever. Like I'm looking at the shorelines all the time too, and I can't help but think that some of the biggest waves or best breaks are offshore on these islands or reefs, or more difficult to get to.
100%. There aren't a ton of people accessing via boat, but there are some.
Yeah. It's hugely committing and time consuming.
It's hugely committing. Also, our weather in like the winter and the swell producing months
Yeah.
is not overly friendly. So like in BC, there's dozens of people who are taking boats to the same spot even.
Okay.
Here it's a little bit less so. But yeah, you're right. The islands, anytime you get closer to the continental shelf,
Yeah.
you're sustaining more swell energy, so you're likely to get bigger, less interrupted swell. And
You have deep water coming closer to shore.
and
Yeah.
islands are great because one side of the island's always going to be offshore. So as long as you've got enough swell to wrap in there, but
Yeah.
our coast honestly is really conducive and friendly to producing all sorts of favorable swell conditions and wind conditions. You go
Right.
somewhere like Florida, and it's like it faces east, and if the wind is out of the east, that's actually a bad thing. If there's any non-surfers listening to this podcast, onshore wind, you don't really want that. You want swell coming out of the east if you're facing east, but you actually want the wind to be out of the west, creating
Holds
offshore
up the wave.
offshore conditions. It's like skiing a freshly groomed run versus a totally tracked out run at the end of the day. It's like just bumpy and you don't want to be there. So Nova Scotia is great in that we can handle a lot of, if you're willing to put the time in and sort of explore and put the pieces of the puzzle together, there's often
Yep.
really great conditions versus the rest of the eastern seaboard. They have to deal with one direction in their facing coast, and it's all sand, which is boring, kind of. It's like,
Really?
so yeah, I mean, beach breaks are fine. They keep you going, but
Fair.
point breaks and reef breaks and longer rides, those, and variety is nice. You don't want to just be surfing the same spot every day. And that's that back down to Costa Rica. It was great that I was surfing every day, but it was like a lot of repetition, and I had a lot of fun when I got home and we were surfing different types of waves.
Right.
The growth of surfing, certainly here, just as it pertains to Nova Scotia, I guess primarily for what I'm about to ask. What do you think? Obviously, it's been kind of happening pretty quick, like pretty fast. There's a lot more people on the water today than there used to be.
Can I interrupt you here?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Go way back. Like, are you familiar with the original guys? Are you familiar with the stories of like the Joe Murphys and the Joe Reardons and the Landymore brothers? And
I don't know the Landymore brothers. They were the first people to surf.
That's as the story goes.
In the province in 1963, they were admirals' sons from the U.S. They shaped their own boards. They
Their old
sounded
man
like
brought
absolute
a board back
heroes.
and they just showed up and went, right?
Outside of them, I know all of the first generation surfers. Joe
So we
Reardon,
can safely say the first surfers in Nova Scotia was in '63.
July 14th or 13th, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
we can pin it down to a day.
Cool. Yeah.
A particular moment in history.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And then I believe the first gen were like late 60s. I could be a few years off, but
Sure.
Joe Reardon, Joe Murphy, Bob Bellevaux,
The other one.
the list.
Jim Ledbetter.
Jim Ledbetter.
Still around, isn't he?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like we go over and watch the Super Bowl at his house on an annual basis. Those guys are awesome, and I have a huge amount of respect for their dedication and what they went through trying to be surfers prior to the invention of wetsuits. That's wild that you were surfing in Canada in the
I hadn't
North
even
Atlantic.
thought about
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah.
Whoa.
They didn't have leashes, so a lot of our bottoms are like rocky shoreline. They couldn't lose their board. Right. They had no surf shop. They would have to go down, drive to the States, and buy boards or shape their own stuff. And that's pretty great. And it's special that they're still around.
Yeah.
And when we built the shop, that was one of the things that we thought about. We just wanted to make the most inviting space to facilitate community conversation. And Joe Murphy, we hired him to play at our season opener, in the shop. And some of the community had no idea who he was or how special that moment was.
Yeah.
Joe Murphy's a really talented blues musician as well. We sell some of his Hawaiian shirts in the store.
Nice.
But yeah, getting the first generation and some of the older surfers in the mix with some of the newer surfers was a big goal of this space.
That's cool.
So would they have helped you along the way to grow the sport in a way? Obviously you've had a big role in growing surfing here in Nova Scotia.
I didn't realize the surf school was 18 years old.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that is wild.
I know, I still freak out about
Right?
that.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
I don't know that they would have helped the growth of the sport. I don't know that they helped me progress as a surfer. I think what I would like to thank them for is, and what surfing facilitates is this interesting relationship and common point between surfers of many different age demographics. I would take advice from Harlan Patterson, who is the same age as my mother, but I might not take that same advice from her. But it's just coming from a different source and somebody that knows you in this really interesting way. Surfing brings people together in special ways, I could say. If you go on a surf trip with someone for 10 days, you may as well have known them for 10 years. You've seen them scared, you've seen them super excited, you see their eating habits, their sleeping habits, their, what they do when they're frustrated. You're locked in a car for 7-hour road trips, and you just begin to know these people in ways that normal friendships don't form. There's just this crazy catalyst that just, and anyway, so I guess what I'm getting at is that older generation of surfers helped me with things that were not necessarily surfing related, but life related. And that was a very awesome access for me to have the knowledge of all these people that have lived full lives, you know?
It's great that you said that too, because before we pressed the record button, you said, like, how much are we really talking about surfing and how much are we really talking about life?
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to hear you come back full circle to that.
Yeah, I mean, surfing is giving me so much more than surfing.
Yeah.
You know, it's the lessons it's taught me, the travel that came with it, seeing other cultures,
And the
like-
sense of community.
sense of community, like a place of belonging, part of my identity. It's the reason that I invested in real estate and bought a house. I traveled and saw what happened in every other coastal town, and I felt like I was privy to that information that had to happen here at some point. Like people were buying oceanfront homes on Tim Hortons salaries
Yeah.
when I started surfing, and then you'd go to Costa Rica, and the same story was repeated over and over again. That, you know, this person who loved surfing, their parents sold their, you know, beach property, and they would spend their entire life trying to get back to that spot that they grew up.
Right.
But financially, it was just too hard because things were just progressing so fast. And I was like, that has to happen in Nova Scotia too at some point. And, you know, and then it did.
Right.
And
you've been around long enough to watch it happen, right?
I don't feel that old, but yeah, definitely. Like it totally happened in front of us.
In front of
right?
our eyes, all three of
Yeah.
us, right? Like
Yeah.
I can remember specifically coming down to Lawrencetown 2003 and renting gear from Happy Dude,
Yeah.
going out and getting thrashed by waves, and then packing up and going home. But like the whole scene out here since take that for example, 2003, it's
Yeah.
completely different.
Yeah. And there are a lot more surfers now, for sure. Getting back to that question that Chris asked, but it's not growing faster here than other places in the world. Surfing is just taking off globally, and you know, we were just we had good timing with the surf school, with the shop. Things just like we got lucky. I think we did it right, but we also got lucky, and that was fortunate.
And I think
sure.
there's two. Everyone always says, like, you know, it's gonna blow up. It's gonna blow up, and it certainly has, as we've talked about. You know, definitely become more popular here. But the cold water is always going to keep certain people away. It's never, in my opinion, it's never going to be this like crazy huge resort kind of village right down in downtown Lawrencetown.
Yeah,
it's because there is that bit of a barrier you must feel that when you go traveling, when you deal with people who surf only warm water, that they look at you like you're a different breed. Like, what do you mean you surf in that weather? Like, you show them a picture and you got ice on your face. They're like, you're nuts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there aren't a lot of people in the surfing world that want to come surf here.
Yeah.
Unless, and sometimes the people, or often I should say, the people who do visit here have been everywhere. They've been to Costa, they've been to Hawaii, they've been to California, and they are well-traveled, pretty respectful surfers who want something different. And when we do see those people, which really isn't that often, that those visitors, they're generally pretty well, like they integrate pretty well.
Yeah.
And
they're
respectfully.
checking something off their list too.
Yeah. Like the surf school is wildly busy. I said we have 30 employees, but that isn't so much facilitating, teaching someone how to surf. It's facilitating an experience. So we get people up and riding waves, and then they generally go home to Ontario or overseas or wherever they started. And it's not a 2-year process where like making someone a surfer. So
how do you deal with people who come in who are surfers? You can tell, and I'm sure you could pick off if someone's a surfer by talking to them for 30 seconds how good they actually are. How do you deal with those people who are like, Nico, tell me your favorite spot. Tell me where's the best place I can go. That's, you know, how do you, like, because I'm sure you get that a lot. I mean, you're the ambassador of surfing really for Nova Scotia. How do you deal with people who want to know all your favorite secret spots when you know, like, that's a delicate question.
Yeah, I have like a default line, and I tell my staff to say the same thing at the shop, is that we would never take the opportunity of exploration away from anybody. It's
a good line.
It's such a fantastic thing and such a big part of surfing to be able to explore and find something, and what it adds to your session is so huge, and to like deny somebody of that and just say, just go here, it'll be fun.
It's a good line. I say that to people all the time. We all look at the same maps.
Yeah.
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 And
Put
it's
it together.
It's a progression
Put
thing,
it
right? I mean,
together.
and especially it's under a microscope, in my opinion, for surfing. I mean, start with getting a lesson. I always tell people that if you're thinking about doing it, go to Lawrencetown, go to Martinique, somewhere where it's accessible and easy, and someone can teach you, and then you'll grow to want to go explore other places. Don't start by going to a secret spot somewhere. Like build your, and it's the same as in the outdoor world when you want to go on a canoe trip or a kayak trip or a hiking trip. Don't start with the biggest hike. Don't start with the craziest, canoe route or the craziest ocean kayak. Like, you got to work you got to build your skills. You got to work your way up. So I think there's a lot, but with surfing, I know there's just such contention around, sharing spots with other surfers or, infringing upon someone who's been surfing in a certain area for so long. And then you show up and I know what happens. I know that everyone thinks the surfing is super, super chill, and it is for the most part, and everyone's stoked. Definitely the majority of people are respectful in the water, but you do hear stories of, people having fist fights on the shoreline and tires getting slashed. And I know it's not the vibe that is the most common thing, but I always wonder how you have to kind of be respectful of all the people in the space who are surfing, and a lot of different personalities and stuff like that too.
And I should say I do have exceptions. So if somebody tells me that they're going to go to a spot and names the spot and it's out of their skill range, then I'll definitely try and deter them from going there.
Okay.
Right. So if they have a spot in mind and I think it's above their pay grade, I may say you might want to try somewhere else because you might be in over your head in terms of conditions, waves that are too big or too fast or too hollow or too close to shore or something like that. So yeah, there's some exceptions like that. And there's like online spots that are
Tons
posted
of
online and
resources,
stuff
yeah.
now too. So those, like, sometimes spots get a little bit blown like that.
Yeah.
So you do have to kind of deter people and gauge their skill level and make maybe a recommendation of not going out a particular spot, but generally not. And yeah, Lawrencetown, Martinique, awesome, safe spots.
Point Michelle,
always great.
up in Cape Breton.
Yeah, and those spots there's almost never grumpiness at
Right.
right at those main. It's more the tucked away spots that are that don't break that often, or things like that. That I feel like as non-surfers often visualize this as like there's a ton of waves and there's an unlimited resource, and in some surf spots that's not the case. And the surf spot might not break for 3 months straight, and then there is a day of waves, but only a surfable set every 10 minutes and only 2 waves in the surfable set, and there's 10 people out there, and then individuals have waited 3 months to surf this spot, but there's 10 people in the lineup, so you do the math and you're like, all of a sudden some people aren't really going to get any waves, and then if 10 more people come, then a bunch of people aren't going to get any waves, and they've literally suited up, paddled out, taken the morning off work, and not caught a single wave. And that'd be tough, just like it'd be tough if you went to the gym and you wanted to work out and like literally every single weight machine was occupied for the entire duration of your stay. You'd be kind of disappointed. But then if you'd been going there for 10 years and it was your home gym and that just started happening, then you'd be frustrated probably at the same time. And yeah, the ocean's everybody's, but then there are other things that kind of go into it that I'm not condoning or I'm not for or against. I'm just diplomatically trying to explain the situation from both sides, I guess.
For sure. So if someone's looking to get into surfing, that's the route, is like go get a lesson.
Oh, you can surf at Lawrencetown or Martinique and for years and have an absolute blast.
Totally.
And I would say probably like rock climbing or other. There's so many different analogies in other sports that have similar scenarios that are
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Olympics, surfing in the Olympics. How do you feel about that? Like, what's your? And do you think there will be anyone from here that'll eventually be able to make, because what is it, like a couple from Canada? Like, how does it work?
None.
Is that happening this year?
It's none from Canada, so they didn't qualify.
No, not to my knowledge, they didn't. There might be one opportunity, but I doubt anybody's going to be going.
Oh, wow.
I think because it's, and I don't know the latest, but I think because it's sort of like not an exhibition sport, but it's a trial sport. It was only guaranteed for 2 Olympics, I think, or maybe it's 4. But because of that, there's only 24 athletes that will be competing in it. So you've got a max of 2 per country, and there are like powerhouse countries that are just, you know,
So they're just qualifying events that are lined up, and you have to do well in one of those qualifiers, or is it just like overall points? Or
in order to make it, you'd have to make the tour, like the world tour, and then you would have to be the I guess, yeah, if you made the tour as a Canadian, you would be guaranteed a spot. But that is, no one's ever come close to making the tour from Canada.
wow, really?
I think you have to come maybe top 16 in the Challenger Series. I'm out of the
Right.
contest loop now a little bit. I still watch the events, but I don't know exactly how the qualification process works
Right.
for that. But as far as my knowledge is that there won't be a Canadian in this round, and we're basically looking at youth at this point to, like, you know, it's to create a strong and deep talent pool in Canada for surfing. Like we need to start with like really young kids now. Like it's be a tall order to send someone right now with the coaching that we've had in the past and the availability and the funding and stuff like that. I think it's going to be a tough one.
What about Otis? What about your son? How's he, you know?
If he's into it, man, yeah, he seems motivated. He's stoked.
Yeah. He's got a good teacher.
He's got a.
I mean Jill.
Best.
I mean Jill. Yeah, your wife. And
Jill's
you
a great
too.
teacher.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. I mean, we should say that Jill's a very accomplished surfer.
Oh my gosh!
Like,
yeah, Jill
still like actively.
Yeah, still sponsored by Rip Curl. Yeah,
unreal.
And she just came second in the shortboard contest, and she won the longboard contest. Right.
I would love to touch on that for a second. What's your thoughts on? So that's a whole other development. Like when you started surfing, probably all guys in the water.
A
for
ton.
The most part?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I'll go over to the point. I'll look over in the parking lot, and there's like, you know, more women than men in some cases, right?
I think our wetsuit sales are probably 50-50.
Wow.
And then our surf lesson side is 60% women, 40% men.
And so you think they're like starting to surpass
yeah.
men in terms of, I mean, obviously
either that or they buy way more wetsuits than men. I don't know. But I would say, yeah, it's in around there is probably equal.
And I've heard that from so many people. Like, I mean, Jan's told me about this many times. Like, he loves going in the water with a bunch of women because they're so much more positive, and they're so much more stoked, and they're way more, like, he seems like, the way he describes it to me, it's way more respectful. There's less, you know, bullshit going on when they're in there.
Probably less ego too.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it seems like a pretty awesome, and there's a lot of really amazing women surfers out there, like, from here.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool to see. Is there as much on an international stage? Like, is it pretty equal now in terms of opportunities, or?
No, not quite.
Not quite there
Not
yet?
equal.
No.
There's less women on tour. There's less prize money in a lot of events. There's, I would say, likely as much sponsorship, but it's possibly less talent-based and more image-based. That's perception, though. It's not. There's no data behind that. That's just sort of my perception of it. Yeah, but I'm also less involved in the things that surround surfing than I used to be. Like I used to be so intertwined with that, the industry, and now I surf prior to my knee injury this year. I surf as much as I did before, but I'm way less involved in media and websites and keeping up to date with the things that surround surfing, but still in love with surfing and surf just as much as I did before.
There's the famous quote, love what you do and you'll never work a day again in your life. Do you feel that way about Lawrencetown Surf Co?
The surf shop? Absolutely. Yeah. I absolutely love coming in here and just looking at boards and talking surf.
Yeah. And this place here was established 2020?
2020, yeah. It's pretty new in the grand scheme of things and like surfing in Nova Scotia. But we like it. I feel like if we had have opened it 15 years ago, it wouldn't be the space that it is.
Right.
And it was just really great time. We have a shaping bay on site. Chris Mathers makes surfboards from scratch,
Cool.
like inside of our shop. It's soundproofed room. You can watch through the window.
Wow.
All of our surfboards are handcrafted, like some element, or I should say a lot of making every single surfboard here was an individual, either doing the finish sanding or glassing or fin placement or, you know, artwork,
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff.
What else do you have going on here? I know you have a community shower.
Yeah,
Anybody can come in and use it.
absolutely. And in the summertime, and there's an outdoor shower as well.
Cool.
And it's hot water. It's heated. Like, we're just trying to like push stuff in and around the shop that
Yep.
draws people. Like we joke that it's loitering encouraged. Like we want people to sit on the deck and, you know, drink a coffee that they didn't buy here. We don't sell coffee, so they couldn't have bought it here, but like just use the space, you know.
Yeah.
If they have a meeting in town and they're out for a morning session and they want to wash the salt off before they put their suit on, like come
Cool.
on in,
Cool.
shower off. Yeah, we just want people around. It's way better vibes when there's like people around and chatting. And again, it's that community sort of social encouragement,
Yeah.
I think, that we're trying to provide and get into. And it's really nice too. Like I love hanging out here because I joke that it's like uncommitted social time too. If you know, if you can have people over, but then you're hosting and like, you know, you've got to like entertain and stuff. When you're at the shop, you're just like, you're hanging, you can like in and out of conversations as you please, you know. It's just a really like pressure free, and I think it's great too that I have a lot of conversations with people that I wouldn't be hanging out with on a regular basis, or like that we're not maybe comfortable enough to be like hanging out at each other's homes or whatever.
Sure.
But they no problem coming in and like chatting and getting to know people and having really sometimes very interesting conversations with people that you never would have had the space not been here. So,
So you love it then?
yeah, it's really great. The surf school is like tougher because we go from 0 employees to 25 employees
Well, I'm sure it's busy.
inside of a week. And then we get just hammered by tourists, which I also love. And the energy's sweet, but the pace is different.
Yeah.
Is that June to October? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With July and August just being like
Yeah.
absolutely crazy. Yeah, I don't know. Like the water in the summertime is totally manageable, and wetsuits are also good, and the waves are like consistent and great for learning every day. And it's like we really are lucky to have that. So, but yeah, it's busy. So I think I would probably prefer to be like in the shop, in the shade as well. That was one thing that hit me lifeguarding as well as working at the beach doing lessons, is like being in the sun and the wind for 8 or 10 hours is you're exposed to the elements.
You can always tell a surfer just by like their physical look.
Yeah.
Like that wind burn, that like, you know, super kind of like that.
The wetsuit tan.
And like the really dark. You can, I'll travel anywhere around the world and I'm like, that guy surfs. That guy surfs. Yeah, you can always tell.
So Nico, this is the part of the hangout where I'm going to get into the 5 rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Might turn into 6 or 7, but they're.
I got a couple. I got a
should be
couple
fun,
too.
do you?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. So
Are these one-worders or?
just however it
Okay,
comes out,
okay.
man. Just however it comes out.
Okay, ready.
Okay. Patrick Swayze, Point Break.
Oh,
How many times did you watch that movie?
I think 3, but it was honestly, as far as Hollywood surf movies go, it
Yeah.
was just, it crushed everything else. It was all time.
so good.
I love it.
It was so good.
It was a really good movie. It was
So
good.
good.
It was like actually good.
It was like actually good, yeah.
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 And they had some incredible surfers doing their stunt work, which was great. Point Break 2, not so much. You can skip that one.
There was a 2.
I didn't even know there was a 2,
Yeah.
so there you go.
Keanu Reeves was a number 1 too. There's a lot of big stars in that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Mentor, teacher.
Oh, Neil Derling.
Okay. A book you'd recommend.
The Talent Code.
Cool.
Sports psychology.
Okay.
Progression. I love coaching and
talent code?
talent code. I don't remember who it's by.
Okay.
I just gave it to my jiu-jitsu coach.
Cool.
But it's all just about efficiently building skill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you pee in your wetsuit?
Yes. Many times a session.
Keeps you warm too. Right?
There's an awesome line.
Any surfer that says they don't, they're lying.
It's
to you.
if you don't pee in your wetsuit, you're lying.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Do you play an instrument?
Guitar, yeah, not very well,
Sure.
but guitar.
You enjoy it?
Yes.
What's on your playlist these days? What are you listening to?
Adam Baldwin, Causeway Road is like up there.
Good answer.
It's a wicked song.
Close to
really
home.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Close to home.
it is a good song. Good album. Great album too.
Biggest wave.
Sadly, to this day, the biggest wave I've ever ridden was in that first trip to Costa Rica. I actually went down to Chile in that same trip and was out in 35 to 40 foot waves and surfed. I can't tell you how big
16.
it was. And yeah, I think I turned 17 at that point. I was riding like a 7.6, borrowed 7.6, and yeah, was just like had all that confidence of a young man coming out of a swimming career as well. So just like, you know, I've never been afraid of drowning. I've been afraid of hitting the bottom in really heavy situations and shallow waves, but I'm gonna wash up on the beach before I run out of air. So I've never been nervous about tall waves. I've been nervous about heavy waves, but not tall waves. So,
Okay.
but those opportunities to ride surf that big don't come around very often. And so that's why I say sadly, because I would love to do more of that, but that was it. That was the biggest wave I ever surfed in 2002 or whenever that was.
Okay.
Over 20 years ago.
Crazy.
I've surfed lots of big waves since then, but none to that magnitude, I don't think.
How long can you hold your breath for?
Like right now, probably 4 minutes,
Wow.
but training probably longer. Yeah.
That's something you trained as like swimming?
Yeah,
Back in your
it's
swimming
interesting
days?
though. Holding your breath, like chilling here, is just not the same as
Right.
underwater, and it's not the same as underwater being absolutely abused by a really big wave.
Yeah.
And so those times get cut down. But if you're comfortable and you're not scared, then that air lasts a whole lot longer. So, the 4 minutes might get shrunk down to 1, but 1 is still a ton of time.
Right.
And some people are good for like 10 seconds when they're getting tossed.
I once
like
went
that.
and hung out with there's a free diving club out of Halifax. Nicholas Winkler was kind of the ringleader of it. He's talked at Night of Adventure, and I went and hung out with them once, and we just kind of did some dry land training, but with breath work.
Yeah.
And first try, I held my breath probably for like 45 or 50 seconds, and then with some tips and a little bit of practice, I went right up to 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did the same with like the Wim Hof method, like just like some
Okay.
breathing techniques.
Yep.
Same thing, like 30 seconds first time.
I mean, that was just
And then-
laying on the ground.
No, I know,
just
but it's
chilling,
amazing how
like,
quick you can do it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and then
Yeah.
like there's big movies that you train. They'll have like for Avatar, for example, the underwater one they just did.
Right.
They train for like a month, like 6 weeks of just like breathwork training
Right.
and stuff to hold their breath underwater. It's crazy. Craziest surf trip.
Oh. Tuvalu, probably, which is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's, I think, the second smallest country in the world. It's the least visited country in the world. It's basically just the tip of a volcano that's had a reef grown out of off the top of it, and that's all that
Okay.
the country is. And there's a plane from Fiji once a week, and
Okay.
we took like a 12-foot boat from the only hotel there across the reef atoll, 15 miles to the other side. But the island, we lost vision of it over the horizon.
Come
So
on.
we were in the Pacific Ocean with no land visible to
Come
us. And in this tiny skiff, like so small. You couldn't see land anywhere, just Pacific Ocean. And the guy that we hired the boat and that was driving us had been lost at sea twice. Once for like 6 weeks and once for 4 weeks. It's in one of the magazines that we have here at the shop, the story that Michael wrote. And one time I think he drifted into Samoa, and the other time a container ship picked him up, and the government flew him back to his...
I'm guessing you found that out after the trip?
Well, the motor
was lost?
cut out.
No, but you found out that he was lost at sea twice after this event or before or going into
No,
it?
that story was told while we were out there.
Right, of course.
Perfect.
Yeah. Anyway, that was wild. That was a wild one. I was actually pretty scared.
Did you get any
catch
waves and
waves?
stuff? Did you eventually find it? And
Yeah, we
Yeah,
got surf. We spent a week or so there. It was published in a few magazines and stuff. I was with Daniel Jones, who's a really good friend and ex-pro surfer and shapes surfboards for the shop. He's in Hawaii.
Cool.
That's where he was born and bred, but he lives in Hawaii. That was probably like the craziest trip there, for just for being like
No doubt.
completely out of your element and like legitimately scared being out there. Yeah. It's an eerie feeling when you're in the middle of the ocean and you just can't see any land you're on a tiny boat.
I can relate to that just by being on a couple kayak trips on the Eastern Shore, being like, I can't see
the time
anything.
Jan paddled to Sable Island.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sable
right.
Island.
You
trip,
think
yeah.
it's fine. You're visualizing yourself out there and you're like, yeah, no worries. I'll paddle to that island. And then you get out there and it's dark and it's just the water. You can't see anything and you feel so small. And
you can get turned around. It is the craziest feeling.
you
being
can't
in the
describe
ocean.
to somebody.
You can't. You really can't. That's cool. Awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, this has been fantastic. Thanks for your time, Nico.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure. First podcast.
Nice.
Nailed
No
it.
way.
Done.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Everybody, come down and hang out at Lawrencetown Surf Co. for a non-committal hangout.
Yeah,
Right on.
but
See
I
you
think
here.
I'm gonna have to leave here with like a hat or something. I got my old school hat on right now.
I want to see these boards get made.
Yeah, and Chris
Yeah.
he's a wild man too.
That is a
Awesome.
cool process to watch. Yeah. The amount of detail that goes into them. They are basically pieces of art, functional pieces
Oh,
of
for
art.
sure. Yeah.
High performing functional pieces of art. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, Chris is definitely an artist, no question.
Cool.
Cool.
All right. Sweet.
All right, man.
Right
Thanks,
on.
Nico.
Yeah,
It's been
Thanks.
great.
Thanks, Shannon.
Awesome.